itself is about design is about 83% complete. The main things to be worked on, they're still working on in terms of design, is the train operating systems, retaining walls, and some of the major bridges. The contractor has split the project into 3 sections or segments, and they're focusing more on the central segment at the moment. But I think as we enter into the next construction season, you'll start to see movement everywhere. As with any project, the real initial work is in the ground. And so about 18% of the work on the overall project is done, but most of that has been related to earthwork, getting the track bed ready, utility relocations, and additional work related to water and storm drainage systems. Fortunately, all the commercial and industrial demolitions have been completed, so everything's cleared out of the way. And I really do think that in the next construction season, you're going to see a lot of progress, particularly over the next 2. So on the Westlake Corridor project, the scheduled revenue service date is still projected to be May 20th, 26. So we're still on schedule there. Double track has a much shorter construction time. It's completed 1 construction season, and I think the last time I was out there was a lot of progress, particularly east of Dune Park. And so going into the next construction season, you're going to see most of the work occurring west of Dune Park. That should start sometime in the next couple of weeks. I think the winter was pretty mild, so they actually were able to complete a lot of work. In Michigan City, the rail has been relocated out of the street. The street's been realigned. There is some paving work that needs to be completed just because it couldn't be done in the winter months. But that project is moving along quite well. That's what we call the DT1 project. The DT2 project is Skylar's parking garage and TOD structure. The design of the garage is near complete. The developer has actually gone out for bids on a number of the garage components, in particular the precast items. And one of the key issues there was finalizing the NEPA reevaluation due to the change in the building design. And that's actually, we were on a call yesterday with FTA, and that's progressing very well. So I think that's all moved very well, positively. On double track 3 or DT3, which is the Gary Miller station, the east parking lot is now complete. And actually you can see the station building coming out of the ground, starting to see walls, some roof trusses up, and that's moving very well. DT4, the parking lot at Portage Ogden Dunes is complete, substantially complete, as is the parking lot at Dune Park, the east parking lot for Dune Park. So things are moving very well. Construction is substantial completion is expected for January of next year. To be frank, I think that's probably going to move out maybe to the March timeframe, but there's no projected change in the revenue service date of November 2024. So I'm happy to answer any questions if you have them, but there is quite a bit of progress being made.
Are there any questions?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question for Vince, and that is regarding DT3, the Gary Miller station. We received some reports from constituents that the buses were unable to stage inside the parking lot. So they are having to pick up the passengers on a less desirable parking lot location. Is there any truth to that? They also compared it to the bus station at Ogden Dunes and said that particular parking lot is able to accommodate the buses.
Deputy Mayor, to be frank, I haven't been out there to see the bus operations. But what I will do is I will check with NICD. I'll call NICD's project manager, and I'll get in touch with her or the deputy project manager and get an answer and let you know what the situation is.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. If I could respond to them with some information, that'd be helpful.
Yep.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Thank you for that report. The next item on the agenda is the Transit Development District Boundaries Update. Would
Yeah,
that
I
be
Sure.
Aaron?
can.
I'll pass it to
Sherry. Hi,
Sherry.
All
Yeah.
right.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Hi, AJ. Glad
Hi.
to have you serve as our chair for 2023. So okay, I'll just tee this up really quick and then I'll hand it back to Aaron. So so we've been busy working with our communities. Hammond, for example, they've been seeing some really positive development interest. So have many of our other communities. We've been partnering with them on some really great opportunities. So we've also been planning a road show, if you will, and that's going to include kind of the process on the memorandum of agreements that we'll eventually have with our TDD communities. And behind the scenes, we've been working on what we're calling a developer process guide. So Aaron's got some great information on that. So he'll discuss that in a few more slides. Then we want to give you an update on exactly what this slide says, upcoming TDD boundaries to be established. So we did our first set in 2022 and hopefully we can advance the remaining ones here in 2023. And of course, we'll give you an update on our overall planning process with all of our communities as that relates to TOD and the FTA grant administered jointly by the RDA and NICD. And then lastly, I've asked David Reynolds from Policy Analytics to give us all a legislative update on some bills that we're watching that could potentially have a positive effect on the region and our communities and the RDA. So we'll give you an update on the ones that are on our watch list. So, okay, I think I've teed it up. I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Aaron Kowalski, MKSK, and he will continue on with the presentation. Thank you all.
Thanks, Sherry.
Pardon me, this is Leanne Mellon. May I ask a question before we get started into the boundaries?
Please.
Okay, this is for Sherry or anyone else who like to answer it, but we were having a discussion internally at in Munster, and there was discussion about as we develop and when the train is running, the additional needs that we might have in public service in terms of police, fire, public works, etc. And we were discussing how that, and correct me please if I'm wrong, but how the TIF that, or the increment that is captured can only be used for capital improvements, therefore cannot go toward those the public works, fire, police, etc. And there was a comment made that might change and that the RDA might be looking at seeing if we can get the funds to be able to be used for salaries. And I just wanted to see if are you going for an amendment to the bill? If so, what exactly are you trying to get? And then also I was concerned because since the increment that we'll be capturing is finite, it might, if we hire a bunch of people, then that would cause problems down the road because we wouldn't have the money to continue with their employment.
Sure. Well, that's a really good question, Leanne. And so I will answer it this way, so my understanding is that you're correct in when you say that the increment will be used for capital improvement projects from within the boundaries. So anything outside of that, specifically what you're referring to for public safety, gosh, I can tell you we're not seeking an amendment to answer that question directly, but I might have, anyone from our team, probably Vince, David, or Bill are the three I can think of that can probably answer this one a little bit more directly to the public safety aspect of your question. So any of the three of you wanna weigh in on that?
Hi, Sherry. This is David Reynolds with Policy Analytics. Happy to weigh in here. To my knowledge, there isn't any discussions going on that would modify the existing law under the TDD legislation to permit any uses for operating, whether it's public safety or public works or anything to that effect. There has over the years been this ongoing discussions about the TIF legislation. And as you know, TDDs are very similar to TIF. They have similar language, but they're not directly related. They have their own code site and whatnot. And so there have been efforts in the past to broaden the use of TIF dollars for some operating uses. I'm not exactly sure how many of those have, if any of those have been successful. But maybe that's what the person may have been hearing about, was some broadening or some discussions around expanding the use of TIF dollars. But once and I have no knowledge of any sort of discussions ongoing about changes to the TDD legislation and the uses of the dollars.
Okay, thank you for clearing that up. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Leanne. Aaron, would you like to continue?
Yeah, thank you. Next slide, please. Okay, so Sherry alluded to this upcoming engagement. So one thing we are offering, and if you want to connect with Sherry or Dave Wellman to arrange that, that would be great. We're hearing from several of the local units that, you know, you all may have new counselors, new staff, new appointed officials, and that there may be a benefit in doing a recap presentation on the TDD boundaries and kind of a 101 level. So please let us know if that would be helpful. We're making arrangements to do that for at least one of the communities based on their request. So let us know about that. That's separate from the roadshow, as Sherry mentioned. So our thought there is the roadshow is probably actually a series of a couple engagements. The first being, you know, the kind of beginning to have more detailed conversations about the MOAs for the established transit development districts. Obviously, that's going to be an iterative process that's going to take a couple meetings to get through. In addition to that, there is what we're calling a developer process guide. And so that really is the rules of the road, so to speak, for the transit development districts, and especially providing a proactive approach towards interfacing with the development community as potential projects come online, how that process works, how the scoring works, how that interacts with the MOU, and all those different aspects. So as we're kind of getting out of the winter months, those are some engagements that we want to work to schedule with you and whomever from your team are the appropriate individuals to have in kind of getting that process going. So that's one piece of that. In addition to that, and I guess I should pause and see if there's questions on that, or if we do need to provide further detail. Vince and his team have been working on that guide. So I'll pause for a moment, see if there's questions or thoughts on that process. But the idea is we want to get it out in front of you all, work with you all individually to advance that.
Aaron, this is Tim Corcoran in South Bend. Is this the development or the development guide or the process guide? Do you try to tailor it to every or each community? For instance, like, is this where you're talking about like zoning, or where do you apply or for a permit, or, you know, is that what you mean by a process guide, or is it something maybe not quite as specific as that?
It's more actually about the transit development districts and how to work through the process with the RDA to, well, in Porter and Lake County to fund those projects. And in LaPorte and South Bend, Vince, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's a different process that applies there.
Yeah, slightly different process because they're outside the RDA's boundary. But as you said, Aaron, it's more focused just on the TDD, an application for investing TDD funds into a project, but not the overall development, as Tim, I think you kind of referred to as any zoning requirements, or if you're looking for variances, building permits, those type of things are not incorporated in it. So it's not a how to do a development completely as much as just a guide around the TDD process.
Okay, do you have a draft or sort of a table of contents or something like that? Just out of I mean, just more curious about the how this sort of plays out. And
Yeah, we'll work with Sherry on that. I mean, it's still being kind of drafted, but I think that in the near term, it'll be available. It's intended to be a living guide or a living document, so it may have adjustments after that. But let me check with Sherry after the call. This hasn't been totally reviewed internally, so.
Oh yeah, and I'm not trying to like change your mind or anything. I'm just kind of curious as to where it's going. Like so.
Thank you for that. Are there any other questions before we continue? That was a great question. All right, Aaron.
Thanks, AJ. So we continue to assist the local units with what we call technical assistance for development implementation. So as Sherry alluded to, we've been working closely with the city of Hammond, for instance, on kind of helping them with technical assistance as they are working through getting a couple sites ready, hopefully for RFP here in the near future. So that's another thing that we are working with the local units on. And as projects come to the table, we want to start those discussions early so that we can be of assistance as appropriate to really help champion those projects that are supported by the local units and get them off the ground. Other things that we were working on currently, some updates to the nwitdd.com website. You can see a teaser on the right. We're actually developing a kind of a development sites interactive map that would allow for the public and the development community to easily zoom in and out of the transit development district boundaries. Those could be updated as the boundaries are increased in size over time, if that does happen, or as new boundaries are established. We also have the ability to have boundaries of different sites, where be it the sites that were identified as part of the TDD study or the corresponding TOD implementation work, or other sites within those boundaries that the communities might wish to market or highlight. We can include information and table format about those as well. So that's a resource that we're developing internal to the Northwest Indiana website. I think that'll be really helpful. It'll be through Esri Online. So if you're familiar with GIS interfaces, it's a really easy and accessible way to have a link and a map directly on that NWITDD website that can easily be accessed by the community. So in addition to the other things that we're doing to help enable development, we are working to publicize the sites that the local units really want to move forward for development potential. So as we get into the roadshow, we can meet with you all on that too.
Oh, sorry, this is Tim again. Out of curiosity, again, you mentioned some of the other communities and interest that has been sparked through this process. Do you have a sense as to the types of development that developers are really saying, oh yeah, this is great, and it, like, for instance, does it skew more towards like mixed use or residential versus say industrial or commercial or office, or do you have a sense of that right now?
I can give you some general examples of what we're seeing and what kind of interest we're hearing. In a lot of our communities right around the station, there is absolutely interest in mixed use type development, multifamily development, townhome development, kind of patio home kind of development. That type of development has a lot of interest right around the train stations and within walkable distances to those transit development districts that, I would say have more of a downtown or neighborhood feel.
Mm-hmm.
We have also seen interest from employers, where be it industrial employers that are working closely with the local units, some of the areas that, maybe historically industrial that they see an opportunity for the station enhancements as a workforce connector. So there's been some degree of interest there as well. We're continuing to explore also opportunities to attract more commercial and or office development to targeted areas. Some of the communities that have developed the transit development boundaries are trying to bring office, for instance, back into their downtown area. And we really want to support that through this process. So that's the kind of interest we're seeing so far. Most of the conversations we are having are with more of those mixed use type developers as they've approached the local units though.
Okay, thanks.
Next slide, please. So upcoming engagement. So we are targeting this year. So it should say completion for 2024. But for this year, we are targeting and have kind of buy-in from the local units to move forward collaboratively in establishing 4 more boundaries. So Gary Metro, Hammond South, Dune Park, and then Beverly Shores, which may also include a portion of the town of Pines. So the idea is here, now that we're into 2023, we'll go through the same boundary process that we went through with you all for those communities closely. We've been in initial conversations with each of these communities about these places, and we would target those for establishment in 2023, and then they could begin collecting increment in 2024. Tim, I know you're on the call. South Bend Airport is eligible for a TDD boundary. We know that NICD has an engineering study going on to kind of define the relocation of the rail and connections into the airport area. Our understanding is as that works its way through, there may become a point when it makes sense to establish that boundary. We haven't gotten that direct ask at this point.
Yeah, I was just in a meeting with their engineer, DLZ, the airport, and representatives from NICD. And the station. So this is part of the question that I asked you, or why I was asking you earlier, is that currently the station's on the east side of the airport. They want to move it to the west side of the airport. So I'm assuming you could establish the TDD as it is, right? As where the station is currently. But obviously we would rather, I think, it based on where the new location is, even though it's not very far away from the existing station. But I do think they're zeroing in on the very specific location within the airport property.
I think that that's an important step. And Tim, as you know, it's going to be, as we understand it, maybe a little bit different of a TDD, and that it may have more of a workforce focus. And so, I think in parallel to, learning a little bit more about that station, we also want to make sure, how supportive the airport authority, the city, the county, economic development group is with, the plan that I think has been thought through for economic development prior to our study in that area, and make sure that, if we're going to draw a boundary, let's draw it for the benefit of the station and the economic development opportunity in the area.
Right. Yep.
If you'd like us to have a follow-up with us or with you on that, we'd be happy to. I know we're just, we've been in contact with NICD and they've been kind of filling us in as they're doing their engineering work.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think maybe if there's a follow-up, it's just about, making sure everybody understands what the next step might be, and yeah, that's all.
Okay, we can definitely schedule that. Next slide, please. So just as a reminder, so the process for creating or expanding a transit development boundary, and I think as a reminder to everybody, the transit development district can be 1/2 square mile, 320 acres in area as kind of a first pass. And then as development begins to occur in these areas, there is a mechanism that can be triggered by the local units where they approach the RDA and say, hey, we think it's time to potentially expand this boundary up to 1 square mile or 640 acres in area, and that's property area. So, you know, as we are now working with a couple more communities on advancing those boundaries, you know, we've done a lot of the, I think, initial analysis, and we really want to begin to work closely with the local units to then vet what I would call boundary options with different economic development goals and opportunities attached to each. And then, you know, meeting with leadership and understanding how, you know, this boundary then needs to be drafted to correspond to local economic development goals, as well as the goals of getting TOD within the TDD area as enabling, you know, component. And then as we get to that point in the boundary where it is drafted, we need to have those public engagement sessions. We did some of them virtual, I know, during kind of the height of COVID. We did some of them in a hybrid format. We would prefer to do them in a hybrid format so that folks could attend in person or be online and participate. And then once we have buy-in from the public, we would go back around to the local units with another round of edits, incorporate any further feedback from the local units or the public. And at that point where we would have a support letter from the local units, we would take it to RDA public hearing, 2 hearings required by statute. And then once that was concluded, we would take it through to the state budget committee. And David Reynolds, if you're on, I don't know if you've thought through, you know, when we might take it back to state budget committee. I know we took it last fall, so it may be a similar timeline. Next slide, please. Okay, update on implementation. Next slide. So development underway. And I think we'd love to hear from all of you. If there are new projects occurring within the transit boundaries, please, you know, let us know. We know in working with City of Michigan City, they've got quite a bit of interest in their downtown area with multifamily, mixed use and hotel development right at the station area and in the broader downtown. Hammond is continuing to see significant interest in their downtown area, spurred by their recent downtown plan, as well as near the station, as some of those projects hopefully kick off here in the near future. In the downtown area, there are a couple projects that are already kicked off. So are there any other developments that we need to be aware of in the transit development boundaries? Any significant interest or anything anyone wants to report? I can open up the floor for a moment. We'll continue to monitor, you know, over the next several months, and you know, if developers come knocking, you know, make sure we know if they're in the boundaries, if we can be of assistance. That'd be very important. So, next slide, please. So the planning process. So where are we in the process? We are getting towards the end of the planning process. We've been working behind the scenes to develop the plan and with several of the local units to finish up various components of the planning process. So next slide, please. So remaining work. So, you know, here I would say in the next month or so, we're finishing up our planning tasks with local units. Some of the kind of highlights of that, we've been working really closely with the city of Gary on some potential strategies for the downtown area and for potential for a new station area. We've been working really closely with the city of Hammond on some of the developments for their station area and for some additional sites on NICTE-owned property where the current Homan station is. We've been working closely with City of Portage on what we call conservation development concepts. And then one that's not on the list is we've been working with the town of Dyer on a site that they have off Calumet Avenue. So the idea is we've concluded most of our scope, but had some remaining resources. And so we've been working with local units to advance a little bit more of the opportunities planning in these areas. And as we, you know, get our plan wrapped up, we also will have a corresponding presentation that will preview those high-level recommendations. At the end of this process, each community will get both a presentation and kind of a plan with a section dedicated to each transit development district area, and kind of running the gamut of land use and planning recommendations, everything that we've been working on iteratively with you all over the last year and a half. And then our consultants have also put together some technical appendix items. So draft zoning recommendations, infrastructure cost estimates, corridor cost estimates, environmental analysis, things like that, that are specific to each area. Next slide, please. And then I thought it would be fun just to highlight what we're calling some of the big moves for each of these areas. So we've been working closely with the local units, not only on development opportunities, but what are the big things that could trigger the market, in addition to transit development district and the train itself, to really look at these areas as an opportunity for investment. So, you know, in Hammond, you know, station relocation, the Westlake corridor, all of that work is underway as part of the NICD project. The city has worked closely also with NDOT on rail and roadway realignments. So Gosselin and Chicago, providing better access in that area. And then also the city is doing some work to Homan in the downtown to really create more of a complete street that will be the centerpiece of downtown design and revitalization in that area. TDD opportunities. So City of Hammond, we've helped them explore opportunities not only around the station, but in their downtown area as well, in support of their downtown plan. And then I already mentioned the Homan corridor, but those are some of the big moves for Hammond, and I think it's already resulting in a lot of developer interest. The City of Hammond was, you know, I think one step ahead of this process as well with their downtown plan, and really trying to publicize the opportunities there. Next slide, please. So we think about East Chicago, and I know, Deborah, you're with us today, and we've been working really closely with Richard Pryor. We'd be happy to schedule a recap meeting with you now that we're into the new year. But looking at, you know, the station area itself, and really understanding, you know, that the boundary is more linear along that Indianapolis Boulevard area, and that corridor improvements to Indianapolis Boulevard are really key to getting good quality transit supportive investment along that corridor. The connection of the Marquette Trail is also really important in this area, and you know, the linkages from the NICD station up to the Marquette Trail are key. As we've thought about TOD in this area, it really is along that Indianapolis Boulevard corridor, because we really want to support the Roxana neighborhood and you know, the good quality, stable housing and neighborhood that exists there today. Industrial repositioning is another big part of this process, and also, you know, recommendations and prior plans that the city had. And as part of our appendix items, we do have zoning recommendations that are going to help the city to be able to advance the kind of land use that they want to see in this area. And then leveraging the river, we know that there's a lot of cleanup that has already occurred in this area, more to come. A lot of this is in the floodplain, but we understand there's maybe an opportunity, especially with connections along that Marquette Trail, to continue to activate some of that area here as well. Next slide, please. Gary downtown, we've been working really closely with City of Gary staff to advance some strategies around the downtown area, noting that the transit development district boundary hasn't been drawn here yet, but we have been doing some preliminary planning that will kind of back into a boundary. The gray box that you see here is kind of our study area, rough study area at this point. And reestablishing the grid in downtown is very important, improving connectivity, really envisioning a TOD around a station area connecting into the downtown is also important. And then corridor improvements, we put together some recommendations for Broadway as well as 4th and 5th that we hope will be helpful for the city, as well as be able to advance conversations with NDOT in that area. And then, you know, really activating public spaces around the downtown as potential anchors for the neighborhoods that surround the downtown area is another big part of that equation. Next slide, please. As we look at Gary Miller, we know that NDOT has made significant investments in improvements to US 20 Melton Road, as well as the rail relocation in the area, and that's unlocking property for development. The city's also been really prudent in acquiring properties that could be developed along that corridor. So we do believe that there's an opportunity to see significant investment along that corridor and further north into the Miller Village area. We understand that the city also has acquired significant property in that area that is shovel ready in nature, and we've helped the city to devise a strategy and think through what that could be and how that could be enabled. And then the residential neighborhoods around, supporting the neighborhoods, the neighborhood around the Miller TOD district, especially where we can see significant infill housing, filling in the gaps and empty lots within close walking distance of the station. Next slide, please. Portage, Ogden Dunes, we've been working really closely with those communities on long-term plans for enabling infrastructure, long-term plans for what happens after the train is very successful here for several years, and how they can land bank or reposition properties over time, but really also focus on conservation style development with a mix of housing types and support of walkable trail oriented development, takes advantage of the Marquette Trail and linkages to the station. Next slide, please. Michigan City, been working closely with City of Michigan City to envision development opportunities around their downtown area, put together some concepts for improving Franklin Street and converting it to a two-way in the core of the downtown, and then really helping them also to embrace a waterfront district in the northern part of their downtown where they're already seeing a lot of developer interest. Next slide. And then back to the Westlake, work closely with town of Munster on understanding the opportunities that may exist along the Ridge Road corridor in support of the Ridge Road planning that they've done, the corridor improvements that prior to our study, they had recommended, and we think set the town up very well for a very walkable TOD area in kind of a neighborhood that's already historically TOD, and really understanding how they can maybe work to fill in some of those gaps or strengthen the work that they're already doing. And then complementary commercial that really focuses in on enhancing the investments that they're already occurring in this area, as well as the town's land use and zoning plans that they've recently been advancing for this area. Next slide, please. And then as we look at the last one, so the Munster Dyer Main Street area, it's really about how do we over time position the areas nearest this station, which is a large park and ride, to see transformative development that's walkable to the station, that's transit ready, and creates a series of neighborhoods that further strengthens the residential neighborhoods around this and kind of this core. Main Street, we put together some initial concepts for both the communities that are being utilized as that work is being engineered currently, and then really trying to support residential neighborhoods in the area and improve the look and feel of the Main Street corridor, but then also the attractiveness of this area for the people that live here today, as well as the people that will utilize the train. Next slide, please. If there's questions, I'll take them. If not, Mr. Chair, I might turn it over to David Reynolds.
Okay, before we continue with the legislative update, did anyone have any questions for those presenting the updates on the Transit Development District or the TOD planning?
I had a quick question for Aaron. Aaron, when are we up again for our next discussion on the downtown Gary TDD?
We are ready to meet with you whenever you're ready.
Okay. Yeah, why don't we talk offline and get that on the books here soon?
That sounds great. We'd look forward to it.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question. Can I get a copy of these slides? after
Absolutely.
that? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'll do that, Deborah. And if you want to meet to have a recap, I know Richard was a little bit more involved than you as you're kind of getting into this process. Happy to do a recap meeting with you too.
That would be excellent. Thank you, Erin.
Sure.
Great. Are there any other questions? Okay, hearing none. If we could continue with the legislative update. Thank you.
Thank you, AJ. Once again, this is David Reynolds with Policy Analytics. Sherry asked me to give the committee an update on some of the legislative activities that are going on during the General Assembly. There are two bills that are up here on the screen that have been introduced and do appear to be moving. I'll go through each of them, and then happy to take any questions when I'm done or during, either way. The first one is Senate Bill 434. This is a bill that was authored by Senator Melton, and essentially the bill would divert, if you will, some state wagering tax revenues that are paid by the Hard Rock Casino. It would divert about $18 million per year into a economic development fund, which would be administered by the RDA. The purpose of that fund is for the construction of a convention center near the casino and a construction of a downtown station area, including platform improvements to the downtown Gary Metro station area. The bill was initially heard in Senate Appropriations Committee last week. It was held. It's our understanding that the bill has been rescheduled for tomorrow, and that the chairman of the Appropriations Committee, Senator Mishler, will be offering an amendment to that bill. We're not sure what that amendment contains right now, but the bill is scheduled to be heard again tomorrow at 8 a.m. Central in the Senate Appropriations Committee. Additionally, the Appropriations Chairman and Senator Charbonneau and Senator Randolph were all three added to the bill as co-authors, and that's a good indication that there's interest in the bill, especially when the chairman joins as a co-author of the bill. Moving on then to the House, there is another bill that has some TDD impacts. It was originally introduced by Representative Soliday as House Bill 1540. The bill would have permitted the RDA to create a transit development district around the city of Valparaiso's transit center, which I understand is currently under construction, and it's adjacent to the Journeyman Distillery, which is also under construction. That the introduced bill was assigned to the Roads and Transportation Committee. Last week, that committee heard the bill, and they folded that bill into House Bill 1046 and then moved that bill. And so the concept of permitting the RDA to create a transit development district in the city of Valparaiso is now in House Bill 1046. It has got out of the Roads and Transportation Committee and was reassigned to Ways and Means of the House for consideration of the fiscal impact. And that is scheduled today at 12:30 Central. Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to take any questions if there are any.
Thank you. Thank you, David. Are there any questions of David regarding his legislative update? Hearing none, we'll move on then with next steps and questions. Who would be best to take on this item?
I will be happy to help or to direct any questions anyone has to the appropriate person. Are there any questions?
Oh, this is Tim again, and I just had a thought, and I don't know if it's something that or I'm not sure who would take it on, but to me, what's interesting is to continue to hear the success stories in the different communities, but also to sort of understand, like, again, what types of development are maybe yielding the greatest return back to the TDD across different development types, maybe. And I know we probably don't have a lot of that information yet, and so that's okay, but it'd be curious to sort of see how we benchmark ourselves as we move forward, not just to celebrate successes, but to help with future decision making.
Sure. Aaron, I think MKSK has done some analysis, maybe working with policy analytics, looking at the impact of different types of development.
Yeah, I can take a crack at that, and then Bill and David may want to pepper in. So, Tim, I think that's a very good point, and I was actually just writing it down as you were saying it. But I do think that tracking the ROI of the TDDs, and in particular by land use or development type, is going to be really important as we move forward. Our team has, as part of our development testing that we've done as part of the creation of the TDD boundary, as well as in the TOD recommendations, we've looked at kind of what I call an arc of development, or a spectrum of development potential. And so that has kind of provided policy analytics with kind of information needed to then track the potential to create increment within these transit development districts. The other thing that might be helpful is, and I know we've done it in the past, in the near past, I should say, different development types in general yield different kinds of property tax mixes. So if you think about an acre of property, for instance, a mixed use development is going to yield, some of the highest benefit from a value capture perspective. Something like a one-story commercial product, for instance, is going to yield much less from a property tax perspective, and then that could, within a TDD district, yield less as well. So that's an example of kind of the two ends of the spectrum. But that's maybe another way that we could begin to track or explain that, in addition to on a project by project basis. So I don't know if that answers your question. I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, well, I mean, the reason I think I have sort of two sort of ends of the spectrum reason for asking the question. I mean, one is tracking our success, I think only, supports the overall goals of the, why we're doing this, and the reason the state has allowed us to do these things. So a little bit of tooting our own horn, which is never a bad thing, right? The train horn, obviously. But I think as each community moves forward, I think there's like a learning experience that can happen between different communities. And I know we're all a little bit different, and maybe there's influences by being closer or further away from Chicago, for instance. But as land becomes either available or projects or decision-making matrices that the decision makers want to maybe have in order to gauge which project might be worth it over another, and just knowing what those different sort of decision points might be, I just think might be an interesting exercise. Even I know it could get really sort of in the weeds and complicated, but maybe if it's just at a big picture, high level at the moment, for us to help guide decision making of the different bodies that are making these decisions, I think would be interesting. And then it also helps us with the overall impact, right, of the goal of the underlying goal of the project, the whole thing, right?
Let us think through that. That may be something that in the developer process guide is covered. There may be some different ways to integrate that. Any others from the team have anything they want to add to that? I mean, I think Tim, that's a great selection or a great suggestion on your part.
I think it's also going to be important to think through the different conditions that exist in these different transit development districts across northern Indiana. And what I mean by that is the infrastructure that may already be in place versus the need to install new infrastructure, which would and obviously have a different impact on the return of the investment. Again, a project in Michigan City constructing on an urban lot with adjacent utilities is going to look a lot different from a greenfield development that needs to do everything, including the road, and all the other required infrastructure to go vertical. So I think that it's a great thing. I think the tracking though is different from urban, more established locations where infrastructure may be in place to then looking at communities like Portage Ogden Dunes or Munster Main Street, where it's more greenfield in nature and may require a different investment from the infrastructure standpoint.
Absolutely. Yeah, let us think through that. I think these are all really good points.
Are there any other questions or thoughts that want to continue that line of thinking?
I could say something, add to what Tim was maybe saying, but East Chicago would welcome like some kind of roundtable conversation on the developing process, moving towards development, concept points, context wise, maybe some open discussion on the different opportunities because of the context for each development is different. Any kind of conversation about it would be great. So.
Thank you, Deborah. And if I could, hop on that a little bit. Aaron, in your presentation, when you were talking about the ongoing work in East Chicago, you mentioned in there the Marquette Greenway Trail and how that is an important investment, an important thing to think about when contemplating the planning in the area. We're here in Portage also working through an alignment of the Marquette Greenway Trail. We've had some roadblocks thrown in front of us. I think we all in Portage, there's some of us that believe that this is a significant infrastructure investment, but understand that there might be ways to get, I guess, a little bigger bang for our buck, maybe to throw out some. But I guess along the lines of roundtables with development, I believe that that could be either maybe it's a separate discussion about the Marquette Greenway Trail, but communities like East Chicago, Hammond, Portage, we are making significant local investments, offering local matches to the monies that have been secured. And any time that we could leverage one infrastructure investment at the local level with another, which is much of what we've talked about today, I think is ultimately going to deliver a better project at the end of the day. So any help in terms of roundtable discussions or thoughts on how we can come together collaboratively as planners and economic development professionals to talk through how to leverage one investment versus with another, I think that would be, I think that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll think about that and circle back. I think those are all good ideas.
Any other questions of the membership? David Wellman, I'll turn it back over to you. If I guess if there's anything in closing that folks on the staff or consultant then would like to bring as we bring this meeting to a close.
Thanks, AJ. I don't have anything on my end. Anyone else? All right, hearing nothing, I turn it back over to you, AJ, to
Okay.
motion to adjourn.
Okay, thank you, everybody, for your time and commitment to this. And I think a very another good meeting with a lot of dialogue that I think is going to lead to some follow-up conversations about, again, how best to take advantage of all of these investments that we're making throughout northern Indiana. So with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, there's a motion to adjourn. Is there a second? All right, there's a motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.